pretty standard blue, red, green, Delver Secrets aggro control deck. Just, you know, all the hits. Delver, Nimble Mongoose, Stifle, Daze, Force of Will.
Yep. Quick clocks and some soft counters.
Yeah. He's just going to try to jump on Pavel while he's trying to establish his mana and set up his combo and just keep him there as long as possible.
Yep. So, a Tropical Island and a Nimble Mongoose to start the game for Chris. Paul with an Ancient Tomb.
Okay. No Fear. Doesn't care about the Nimble Mongoose clock at all.
And a Talisman of, that's the blue-black Talisman
Right.
of Dominance. Taps for either a colorless or a blue or a black. There's a cycle of these basically Underground Sea artifact, or Underground River artifacts in Mirrodin. And we're going to try to resolve Grindstone. We're potentially walking this into a Daze. It's going to eat a Force of Will, which is awesome for Paul. We've sort of very loudly declare what we're going to be up to here.
Right.
His deck also features Tezzeret, Ancient of Bolas, which is a very powerful Planeswalker and an artifact-centric deck. I believe this deck is actually a derivative of something Caleb Durward used to good effect in a Legacy Open not that long ago.
Yeah. Caleb's deck was quite similar. I don't believe he had the combo elements.
No, I believe, yeah, he was much more in a Tezzeret kind of control deck with Baleful Strix, I believe.
Sure.
Another Talisman. Trying to get over the top of Chris's soft permission.
Right. Establishes mana. Like the Wasteland on his Ancient Tomb is slowing him down quite a bit. You can see the Jace in his hand that he really just wants to have in play.
Yep. So we're going to crack a fetch here, and I believe this turn is going to feature Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. It's I've been able to see Chris's hand, but he's going to be trying to so the way the Delver deck works is that his elements are either very aggressive or very reactive, and but he's not going to have a ton of both. So like if he's long on creatures, he's just going to need to kill Paul as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Especially if his permission is mostly in the Daze and Spell Pierce vein, he's not going to be able to make good use of those cards as the game goes on longer.
And that's why it's so important for Paul to get out of ahead on mana.
Yeah.
Because pound for pound, Paul's cards are significantly more powerful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Nimble Mongoose is still just a 1/1, right?
Yep.
It's very much about establishing access to Paul's spells through Chris's soft permission.
Yep. Also noteworthy is Paul has 2 copies main deck of Ensnaring Bridge. I believe he has one in hand currently, and that card, I mean, there's some burn elements to the Rug deck, but that pretty much just ices him. I mean,
yeah.
It's like...
And here we go.
Yep. He's going to get basically one more hit in because Paul has 3 cards in hand.
Yeah.
I was sideboarding this actually in the last Legacy tournament in my burn deck for this matchup in particular.
Because we can see Chris's Lightning Bolt, but it's going to be pretty hard for him to assemble more than like 6 points of burn.
Yep.
Without really having to chain through a lot of cantrips.
Yeah, the only real hope that he has is that Paul gets choked on expensive action somehow, can actually play the cards out of his hand, but that's asking for a lot.
More Tarmogoyfs.
And we have, it looks like we have Jace the Mind Sculptor in our hand, so we can actually just play that and Fate Seal Chris to lock him out of playing burn spells. That Lightning Bolt is going to resolve. And now if Chris can basically get 2 cards out of his hand, if he can go land and play a Jace and Fate Seal, that should pretty much wrap it up. But the Goyfs can still attack. I mean, it's... he needs to get this stuff out of his hand like pronto.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the Nimble Mongoose is certainly still going to be able to attack. It's still a 1/1.
So he has Thirst for Knowledge in his hand. So even if he thirsts, he can discard 2.
Right.
And then just play a land presumably that he can find in the top 3, and then he's outside of Tarmogoyf range. Or he can actually just Thirst for Knowledge and maybe get a different card type into the graveyard.
Oh yeah.
And get the Goyf. Because I believe sorcery is not represented right now. So if he has a way to get that set up too, then. Oh, so this plus Thirst should get him in the clear. Yeah.
Sure. He can also just discard his Jace to pump the...
Yep.
Oh, and he found Damnation.
Yeah, he found a bunch of hits. Yeah,
Sure.
he also found a Wormcoil Engine. I think he needs to discard two, like probably a land plus a Wormcoil.
Right.
Because the Wormcoil is not that exciting now with Ensnaring Bridge in play.
Yeah, it's a little less impressive. I suspect he's just trying to figure out how he actually is going to actually end the game. Like, the Ensnaring Bridge is what's going to cause him to win, but he still has to actually defeat his opponent.
Yeah, and I believe your best route is probably just Jace going on.
Absolutely. It'll also prevent Chris from being able to find any outs.
Yeah, I think the question that Paul has is whether or not he wants to hold on to this Damnation.
Right. Because it's a good safety valve in case something does go wrong. The Rug Delver decks tend to have, one or two pretty flexible slots that they can play a lot of different cards in. It's unusual for those to be bounced, but, it's certainly in range.
Yeah. It's like, is it completely out of the question that he could have something like a main deck Grudge? No, it's
right.
It's conceivable.
Just one.
Yep, so this is the way he's going to control. He discarded Jace, which puts a Planeswalker in the graveyard and now pushes the Goyf well outside of a range to be able to attack.
Right, and so he's keeping his Damnation in his Wormcoil Engine?
Yeah.
So he's going to be able to lock up the ground pretty effectively and use Damnation to see if the board's getting out of control, and then he's just going to hide behind Wormcoil Engine, I assume, until he can find either Painter Servant Grindstone or Thopter Sword.
It's also conceivable that he could cast Wormcoil next turn, then Damnation leaving 3 tokens, and then keep enough cards in his hand where he can send the Lifelinker in to get himself out of burn range.
Yeah, certainly, 8 is a pretty good life total against the Delver deck, but I think the only way Chris is going to win is with a bunch of burn spells.
Okay, so we're just going to cast our Damnation here.
Chris has Spell Pierce, isn't sure if he cares about his creatures anymore. They're not doing him a whole lot of good.
Yep.
Doesn't seem to be concerned.
Stops the Nimble Mongoose, and it also puts it at Threshold, so now he doesn't have to worry about future Nimble Mongooses as well.
Yeah. I'm actually not sure if Chris really wanted to let that Damnation resolve. It feels like he's not going to get much action out of the Spell Pierce in the future. But
well, I mean, he could have comfortably paid for it.
Oh, are those lands off screen? Oh, I see.
Yeah, he's got a Talisman and a Seat of the Side Nod, so.
Fair enough. Like I said, he's not going to get a ton of action out of that Spell Pierce.
Yeah. I mean, it's very unlikely.
It's going to be hard.
So the Goose is thresholded. Just confirming how they want to represent that.
Right. A lot of different dice going on here.
Yeah. Legacy is a format full of some challenging tracking.
Right. It is very difficult to keep track of all of the random triggers that are going on at all sorts of different speeds on all sorts of different cards that you may have never have seen before.
Yep. Yeah, we had a match before where Tabernacle was definitely flustering both players.
Yeah. It's just very difficult to remember all the different upkeep triggers. You have Aether Vial, you have Tabernacle. It's especially with Tabernacle because of how it interacts with your upkeep triggers.
Yeah.
If your opponent controls the Tabernacle. So. All is found is Thopter Founder.
Pretty sweet with Wormcoil Engine.
It's not bad.
Not a bad combo.
Right. Gonna get a little value here.
It'll play. And now he can actually blow up, if he's feeling so inclined, he can also blow up his bridge and start just trucking in with his Wormcoil Engine.
Right.
Actually, where I would go against Rug is there's just no getting out.
Yeah. There's it looks like he's content to hide behind the bridge for a little longer. We find Jace.
Tezzeret, maybe?
Tezzeret.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Do we have lethal artifacts yet? So Tezzeret's Ultimate's going to drain Chris for two per artifact.
So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, now 18. Okay, yep. Yeah. That's good enough.
Pick it up. He's had enough.
Yeah. Paul had numerous paths to victory in that game.
Just choose how you want to go about it.
Okay, so in the sideboard we have a single Ratchet Bomb. He has one in the main deck. This is Paul. Obviously, very Powder Keg, very good against the 0 and 1 casting cost deck.
Sure.
3 copies of Spell Pierce that I do not like. 3 copies of Mind Break Trap, 3 Engineer Plagues, and then another
combo.
7th combo he added to the
Sure.
deck is Leyline of the Void and 1 Helm of Obedience.
Yeah. So Helm of Obedience is from Alliances.
Yes.
Yes. So it is an artifact for 4 with 1 tap. Mill your opponent until they hit a creature. Except with Leyline of the Void in play, your opponent's cards are just getting exiled, and Helm of Obedience only stops milling them when a creature goes to the graveyard.
Yeah.
So with Leyline of the Void in play, they're just their entire graveyard, their entire library is just exiled immediately.
Yeah, so it's another random 2-card kill.
Sure. And it's like I'd be a little bit surprised to see him bring in the ley lines here. Like they're okay against Nimble Mongoose, but they're not super exciting.
Yeah.
So he can transmute artifacts for his 1 Helm, but he has to have the ley lines to.
Yeah,
to
and that's a
really
lot
go
of
off.
slots to be bringing in for a card that might not do anything.
Yeah, his deck seems rather well positioned for this matchup. Chris is getting access to a couple of Ancient Grudges here, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, he's got a couple Red Blasts and a Pyroblast, 2 Grudges, and Naturalize, all of which will be productive in this matchup. He probably wants to cut some of his Random Burn and Soft Permission, which quickly get outclassed, as that game was a pretty obvious indicator of.
Oh yeah, his Stifles, I don't believe Paul presented him with any targets. He only has 2 fetch lands in his deck.
Yeah, I mean he's got things that trigger but aren't, he's got things like Planeswalkers and there's a Grindstone, there's one-shot stuff he can do, but not actually really trade 1-for-1 with a Stifle.
Right. I think he's going to want to keep his soft permission in, just despite the fact that it's going to get outclassed as the game goes along. He's going to try to keep the game in a state where Paul is choked on mana for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, and especially with the Ancient Grudges, he's going to be able to go after Paul's mana if Paul has an artifact land heavy draw, and just drag him back into the early game and just club him to death with Delver Secrets.
So, from R&D's perspective, I mean, Modern is sort of supposed to be the middle ground between Legacy and Standard, and Modern decks are also capable of like killing relatively quickly, pushing someone out of the game.
Right.
What do you think are the defining characteristics that you would like to see separate Legacy from Modern in terms of play patterns and general style of play?
So, the first example would just be that games go longer. Like in Modern, we're pretty uncomfortable having decks that can kill on turn 3 pretty consistently, as opposed to Legacy, where there are some very aggressive combo decks that can in fact kill that fast. So in Modern, we're trying to make it a format that's, you get to your 4th turn, you get to like play some mid-range creatures, sort of evolve your board state a little bit. The thing that defines Legacy the most relative to Modern are cards like Brainstorm, Wasteland, Force of Will. Force of Will is really important to Legacy because of the need to interact on turn 0, and we don't want Modern to be a format where you have to be interacting on turn 0.
Sure. And the best indicator of that is how a lot of the fast mana cards are banned in Modern. Chrome Mox and Rite of Flame and those things.
Anything that is generating a lot of mana is certainly looked at very, very heavily when we're making these kinds of decisions.
Right.
The Modern Pro Tour and Grand Prix that we've been seeing that tend to have a little more actual creature decks as opposed to Legacy, where the creatures are just sort of mostly there for their disruptive elements. Like people play creatures in Modern more for their bodies, which is something we're quite excited about.
Yeah. In fact, one of the cards on the Legacy, the Modern rather ban list is a creature that is actually just a body.
Right. Wild Nakatl. The other thing about Modern that we're excited about is potential diversity, right? And with Nakatl specifically, it's awkward how Nakatl sort of outclasses every other 1-drop and sort of makes decks just that much more homogenous.
It is difficult to convince yourself to play beatdown deck other than that one when an enabler that powerful exists. Yes.
So everybody's playing Wild Nakatl, nobody gets to play Curse Catcher. Like, cards like that.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely this weird thing in Legacy, contrasted with Modern, where there's like diversity of actual decks that appear versus diversity of play patterns.
Sure.
Those are often conflated in players'
Yes.
minds, but they are.
It is very true that distinction is important.
If you have 6 different combo decks that are all very good in killing on turn 3 or sooner, you don't really actually
Right.
have like, well, Leyline of the Void is good against this one, and Force Will is good against this one. It's not actual,
And by the same token, it's like, you have these Dazed Thoughtseize decks, and it's like calling those interactive is kind of stretching the definition of
Yes.
the word a little bit.
I totally agree.
These players are settling in.
Yeah.
It's like Paul's not too sure about his hand.
I think Chris might be missing red mana out of his. I'm not sure if I see a fetch, but I think I see Trop Wasteland. Is that right?
Hard to tell. It's a little bit of glare.
Oh, it looks like he has no second land but Ancient Grudge.
Oh, I see.
Wasteland, Trop, Volcanic.
There we
Okay.
go.
It'll play. I mean, it is awfully land heavy in general.
Right. If he's able to find a cantrip, he's going to be able to draw exactly the amount of lands he wants and then sort of go on about his business. But it looks like he's pretty excited to be trying to deny Paul as much mana as possible. I think Paul's just trying to decide if he wants to cash in Ancient Tomb immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also about like which land are you willing to expose to Wasteland.
Right. He has Transmute Artifact in his hand, so his color mana is going to be at a premium, and if he leads out Underground Sea and it just gets blown up, right, he's not going to be able to cast remaining of the spells.
So we are not yeah.
Okay.
He had Spell Snare in his hand. It seemed like for a moment there he was thinking about keeping it up. But since Paul went Ancient Tomb pass,
Right.
it's unlikely that A, he generates 2 mana next turn, and B, has something to do with exactly his 2 mana. So instead we're just gonna get the Nimble Mongoose out there.
Right. There's not a lot that Spell Snare is going to get when you're exactly with Ancient Tomb. It's just like, well,
He probably would have done it last
yeah.
turn.
He has the Soul Read, as it were.
Goose in for 1. And we're gonna bolt. So Chris is off to a fine start, but you definitely, like, 1 Grudge is unlikely to hold off
Right.
Paul for all that long. When it's backed up by some counters or a very good clock, Ancient Grudge can do a lot of work, but by itself, it's asking a lot.
Right. He's gonna need to get his Mongoose up to 3/3 as quickly as he can and start clocking Paul for a little more damage. So right now Paul's can kind of just sort of sit back at his leisure and sort of test the waters, see what kind of permission Chris has.
Yeah.
The other interesting part about all of the various combos that Paul has, he's able to use a bunch of random cards as test spells that it's going to be hard to play against. Like,
Right.
Chris has no idea if this card matters or not.
Yeah, it might just be totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
Or it could be game if it resolves.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's like, and Paul has a Transmute Artifact, but I don't believe he has a Sword of the Meek. So if he sticks his Thopter Foundry, he can go get the other half, but just got Spell Snare, and he's pretty indifferent about it, I think.
It looks like Chris has one of his 2 sideboarded Gilded Drakes, which is, again, like, that's good against some of the stuff that Paul does, but it's not necessarily good against all of it.
No. If we can find a way to trade Gilded Drake out for a Wormcoil Engine, like, that's going to be super sweet.
Yeah, but if we're just getting, like, Grindstone Painter Servant with Gilded Drake in our hand.
Because Paul just never has to expose his Painter Servant to Gilded Drake until he's ready to actually kill Chris.
Yeah. So we have the option of, I think the plays that we can either do is Pierce plus Thirst for Knowledge, or try to stick Jace that turn.
Right.
So, yeah. Chris kind of had to keep that initial Ponder because he was missing red mana and the Wasteland was attractive.
Right.
But now he's definitely, flooding out relative to what this deck's need for mana is.
Yeah, he's definitely feeling the effects of not having a lot of velocity to be able to sort of run through his deck as quickly as possible and sort of find his most efficient
cards. All right, we're going to force that Thirst.
Oh, no.
Okay. Not awesome, but ultimately not that harmful, since I don't think that Pierce was really ever going to resolve productively in this game. I mean, it's a force of will thing, but...
Right. It does get cards out of his hand in case he's trying to set up Ensnaring Bridge, so...
Sure. I think with one card left in hand, and Chris using a force of will instead of a soft counter, we're supposed to try to land Jace here.
I would agree. The only card that Chris could have that would really punish that would be something along the lines of Pyroblast.
Yeah. And then he's down to 0 cards in hand,
right.
And then your transmute artifact action
yes.
can start happening. Looks like we're going to start with a Talisman.
Right. The other interesting thing that Paul can try to do is start setting up his combo immediately, just because he knows Chris only has the one card.
Can we get the text on Transmute Artifact up on the screen real quick here? Because it is a special one.
So Transmute Artifact is blue sorcery. It allows you to sacrifice an artifact to go search your deck for another artifact and put it into play, and then you have to pay the difference in the converted mana cost of the card you sacrifice and the card you get.
Yep.
So for example, if he sacrifices his Talisman to go get Wormcoil Engine, he's going to have to pay 4 mana when Transmute Artifact resolves, or his Wormcoil Engine is going to die.
Yep.
Of course, it's a Wormcoil Engine, so he's going to get 2 3/3s if it dies, which is a nice little interaction. But it's a tinker with some added costs. I can't believe that Tinker was the card that comes after that. Transmute Artifact
It feels like
is
the
just
fixed
by
Tinker,
far,
right?
It's the fixed Tinker that we printed first.
Well, it looks like we went into Leyline Helm of Obedience land, too.
Sure. A little of this, a little of that.
The combo sampler.
Right. We're not sure how we want to beat him. Just keep him on his toes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is relevant that Ancient Grudge will stop all of Paul's combos in terms of if he gets Thopter Sword going, he can just blow up the Thopter Foundry, and against Painter Servant Grindstone, if you kill the Painter Servant while the Grindstone activation is on the stack, you get to live another day. With Leyline and Helm, once Leyline's in play and he activates Helm, that's just lights out for Chris.
Yeah. Although, yeah, and he actually can hard cast the Leyline too. Right. As he has enough mana.
Which will also prevent the Nimble Mongoose from getting the Threshold. Yeah. So there's a lot of options he has here. Chris
There's just no shortage of options, right. That's for sure.
It is the sampler. He is so many doors to go through. It's very exciting. This deck is really fun to watch.
I'm a little surprised that he wouldn't grudge the Talisman, because once City of Traders in play, he's got to be somewhat choked on mana.
Right.
All right, let's see what we're getting.
We're going to have to read this.
And it is not clearly written.
No, it is. I'm very confident that the Oracle text is not what's on the printed card. Just pretty sure that's true.
All right.
Thopter Foundry it is.
I assume we're just going to grudge this. If you wanted it bad enough to tutor for it, It seems reasonable to get rid of it.
And now he's actually gotten into the pretty sweet space of the Talisman's off the board, and he also got the Transmute Artifact with the Ancient Grudge.
And he has Leyline Strain in his hand that he can't cast now.
Right. Chris doesn't know that, although, Paul has so many cards in his hand that Chris has got to know Paul's up to something, but he's not sure what. All he knows is that he doesn't quite have enough mana to do whatever he wants to do.
Yep. I think Paul would have been in a little bit better shape this game if he just stuck Jace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And started Fate Sealing.
Right.
And then you have all the time in the world to set up whatever ridiculous shop.
Right, because with Jace Fate Sealing Chris every turn, his Nimble Mongoose has got to start deciding pretty quickly if he wants to be keeping Jace off his ultimate, or if he's going to try to keep racing Paul. But then Paul just has this threat of this Jace that's just getting bigger and bigger every turn. Yeah, ever since 2002, Blue Mages have been having a lot of problems with Nimble Mongoose, and Ratchet Bomb is going to finally kill the shrouded 1/1s that have been pecking away for so long.
Well, Chris still has Grudge at the ready, so he has an out.
Right.
But that Grudge is also very valuable
Yeah, Chris is in this awkward spot where he needs his threats, and so Grudge can let him keep attacking for longer. The problem is that, you know, if he blows his Ancient Grudge, it's like that's basically all that's keeping him safe from whatever horrors Paul is up to. Well, we are starting to find some counter spells and a few extra creatures here. So.
Well, you have Delver, Force of Will, and Green Sun Zenith we're looking at.
Right.
And I think he's committed to just keeping the Delver
for
Force of Will.
His Force of Will is back live. We do have Threshold.
1, 2, 3. So we get to hit him for 6 here.
Oh yeah.
Knock him to 5, and then presumably after combat, Grudge the.
He's gonna let him at least activate it, I suppose.
Oh, he's letting him untap.
He wants to keep the Grudge for whatever's coming next. I feel like maybe he wanted to grudge this Ratchet Bomb and just sort of try to end the game as quickly as possible.
I agree. And now Paul actually drew Force of Will this turn, which is devastating because now he can just use Ratchet Bomb, now play Jace with Force backup. Presumably Chris is going to force the Jace, and now it's like huge trouble.
Yeah, Paul is pondering his many options.
Yep.
I absolutely agree. It's time for Jace to show up here. But looks like we're just going to go set up more artifact combos here.
Yep.
It is true that he's going to be able to set up with...
Alright, so those are the last cards in hand. And Chris knows that he has Nimble Mongoose on top, so Paul's actually not safe at all here. I mean, he can force the Mongoose, I guess. But his next cards are Mongoose Zenith, so he's actually pretty threat heavy. And he still has Grudge in the graveyard.
So it looks like Paul is trying to set up his Thopter Sword combo with the Transmute artifact in his hand.
I would just force this and stick Jace.
Right.
This is the I sound like a broken record here, but
no, I agree absolutely. Like maybe he's trying to. All right, we're giving up on the Transmute artifact plan.
Yeah, it's just time to Jace lock someone.
Time for Jace. Yep. Which is also going to let him, if he starts Fate Sealing, he's going to be able to get rid of the Green Sun Zenith that Chris has.
Yep.
Okay.
So I assume we start with a Fate Seal because, you know, Paul's at 4, so he's in.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to be dead to Lightning Bolt here because eventually, you know, Paul has a fetch land in his hands. He may not want to cash in his City of Traders just yet.
Yeah.
But any wasteland, then he's actually going to start being hurt for mana too. All right.
Yeah, this is the way I would go. So he's looking at the Green Sun Zenith that we saw from the earlier brainstorming and is wisely putting it on the bottom.
Right. Now Chris is in a pretty bad spot. When he gets Fate Seal, he does get live draw steps, and the fetch land will give him another live. So like when Paul Fate Seals him and lets him keep a card, it's like Chris knows that card's probably no good and can shuffle away.
Yeah.
Try to find a new threat. The Ensnaring Bridge in Paul's hand is gonna also allow him to lock out Chris's combat step pretty easily.
So we're gonna brainstorm here.
I'm not scared about the top of his deck anymore.
Yeah, well, with the fetch line in play, it's also just...
Sure. I'm not sure how quickly Paul's going to be able to set up any of his combos.
Yeah, it's tough because cracking the Polluted Delta would allow him to cast Leyline, but there's a huge risk in dropping to 3.
Yeah, 4 is so many more life points than 3 right now.
Yeah.
And he loses his City of Traders. Like, that's... Okay.
Another combo?
Sure.
We're just going to grudge that?
We're just going to blow it up. I don't know what's going on here.
I have no idea. It's like another card with like 300 words on it.
Yeah.
Probably bad for me, I guess. I'm just going to let that.
Right, like that's the rule in Constructed, right? Like if your opponent plays a card, you have no idea what it does, and you have no idea why it's in their deck, you just kill it immediately. Like, nothing good is going to happen to you if they untap with it. They're going to go to 3 here.
Yeah, it is risky. I mean, he can Fate Sale Chris, but Chris has 2 fetch lands at the ready for a redraw.
Right, and we know, like, Paul knows that Chris didn't board out all of his Lightning Bolts.
Yep.
Because he got bolted earlier. So.
But I mean, Paul's on, pretty thin ice regardless because he's still like Nimble Mongoose still matters.
Right. Right. There are plenty of cards that Chris can draw, and he's just right back in it.
Oh, there's a force, which is a big draw.
Yes.
Assuming he's no, actually he's only got 3 artifacts in his hand, but we can Jace and Brainstorm, presumably find something. No blue
Found
cards.
a little more mana.
Yeah, some more mana. And a ley line.
It's actually I think the mana is rather relevant here too. Chris fetched out Swamp, which helps protect him from Wasteland. But if Chris finds another Wasteland for the Underground Sea, it's going to shut off Paul from Transmute Artifact.
Yep.
Getting down the Talisman.
Chris has a lot of draw steps to sweat out here.
Right. He's just drawing so many fetch lands.
He actually needs to keep those in his hand in case he draws Brainstorm.
Right.
He needs to be able to keep as much gas as possible because it's not like his creatures are still totally live draws.
Right.
He's got,
And he's going to want to be able to deploy multiple creatures per turn.
So that's when you have the opponent has 3 fetch lands.
Yeah, the fetch lands are going to be helpful against the Jace ultimate. The problem is that Jace is going to go ultimate before he can use all 4 of those fetch lands.
Yeah.
Or all 3, I guess, at the time.
Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Chris, probably a bit frustrated.
He's drawn 5 lands in a row since that Brainstorm. Is that true?
Something like that.
Sure.
A little bit of this could be alleviated by shuffling, but this is still a pretty insane flood out.
Right.
And we still had to sweat. I guess he has 5 mana. He can actually hard cast Force now.
Yeah, and the other reason to keep the lands in your hand is that if he does draw a creature, then he does get a few turns if he's holding on to those lands, right? Because they become his library, and it's like, 2 or 3 attack steps might be good enough. But here it looks like his mind is about to be sculpted.
Yep.
And, yep.
Don't feel bad. Not the first guy this has happened to.
Right. Jace claims another victim.
Another notch on the belt.
Chris is not sure where to put his library. It's just like the exile zone is just over there, I guess.
Some pretty heinous flooding out there, and Paul with his blue-black artifact combos deck.
Right. Honestly, like a lot of the second game, Chris just drew too many lands. Like, that's a pretty frustrating way to lose. I do like, it is exciting to see your opponent do something sort of offbeat and weird, right? Like,
oh yeah.
One of the great things about Legacy is how many different decks you'll play against each round.
Yep.